All right, next question is from Bayesian22. And Bayesian is asking, do V-sits and middle horizontal split holes offer the same prehab benefits for the rear delts that the Manna is supposed to have? And will your fingers facing forward negate these effects? Okay, first off, the answer to this question is that it actually depends on how you do your V-sit. Most people are just concentrating on compressing their body into that V shape in the V-sit. And that typically means that their shoulders are quite a bit forward. The difference between a V-sit and a Manna, and why the V-sit typically doesn't ever lead people into Manna, is simply that with a V-sit, you do tend to be protracted because you're protracted when you start in an L-sit, and that's typically where you start lifting into a V. In a Manna, the trick really, even though you're never going to achieve true full retraction necessarily in a Manna, you can get pretty close. But you're going to have to engage the retractors strongly and get those shoulders back as you're lifting. And if you watch videos of full Mannas, you will see that that is in fact what happens to the shoulders. Now, the fingers being pointed back instead of forward when you're in support doing Manna type work is going to affect a number of things, but the rear delts will still have to work, okay? So it's not like those benefits are going to go away. You may find that as you get further along in your training that you have trouble, your shoulders won't move as well in the higher ranges of motion. That's going to be a very personal thing. That's really something that you're going to have to explore on your own. There are people who have done Mannas with fingers facing forward, or so I've been told. I've never seen it. I've always seen fingers backwards. That does make it easier, but it also requires a little extra conditioning because it's going to be harder on the elbows, and it's going to be in the sense that when your fingers are facing back, forces are going straight across here. If your fingers are facing forward, the axis of force is not through this way to where the triceps are doing all the work. It tends to also go sort of in a shearing way through the joint, and that loads your passive structures, the ligaments, right? So that takes away some of the muscular effort that may have to happen in the triceps down on the medial and lateral head. The long head of the tricep is still going to have to do the same amount of work. So, you know, there's a lot more than just rear delts. The real magic of the Manna in terms of balance for gymnastics is that most things are in a protracted position, right? I mean, almost everything that scores points, right? And most of the things that people want to do that looks cool is in a protracted position. And if you're not really doing a lot of retraction work, then you're going to have trouble maintaining balance. And the Manna, because it is an externally rotated, retracted position, it's something you have to feel. I mean, you don't even have to get into a full Manna. Just doing a Manna lean, which you might, hear called like a reverse planche or whatever. I'm sure there's a ton of different names for it, reverse plank. If it's done properly to where you're lifting the chest, which is really a great cue, you're not just trying to lean back, but you're trying to lift your chest out. And the only way to lift the chest is to squeeze the shoulders back, okay? That's going to really tie together a lot of the scapular musculature, right? With the exception of serratus anterior, which isn't doing much, the traps and the rhomboids and your rear delts and your external rotators, and even your internal rotators to a fair degree because they have to stabilize the joint. All of these things are going to be working together as a unit, but in a very different pattern, and it feels really good. So, from a scientific perspective, it's very hard to give you an exact answer. From an experiential perspective, I would say that fingers back does make a difference, but your mileage may vary. That's something that may be personal. I don't know what to tell you there. I will say that fingers pointing out, like if you were on parallel bars, it feels basically the same as fingers back. So, except you'll have a little more control over some of your balance and a little less control in other ways because the base is smaller. Instead of being from the heel of your palm to the finger, it's only going to be the width of the bar, but you'll have a lot more wrist control because you're actually holding something solid. So I would say that that's the biggest difference between what you get out of the middle split holds and what you get out of the V-sit as they're typically done. Now, if you are trying to retract in the V-sit, then it's entirely possible that you can learn that pattern, but it's a lot harder. So it would almost be like trying to learn planche push-ups before you learn regular push-ups. You're better off being in a split because it shortens the length of the effective lever arm from your hip to the part of your leg that's furthest away from your hip. It's like this long instead of the length of your entire leg. That brings the center of mass closer to your axis of rotation, and that reduces the amount of force you have to generate to lift, and which is why a lot of people lift into Manna that way. I've seen one guy, Lucas Abner, who did it a different way, but he never quite achieved full Manna. He did lift through V, and his problem was exactly what I just said. He had to go back and retrain the way that he set his V up because he wasn't setting that retraction. Once he learned that, he was already incredibly flexible, had complete compression. I mean, it was really, really remarkably good. And he also was pretty light, and he clearly already had a pretty high level of strength to begin with, even before he finally started making those form changes. And they were very dramatic. So that's going to be, I think, where we stop this one. That was a great question. It's a very specific question, too, and it's the kind of thing that may slip your mind. So I hope this helped clear a few things up for people who may have wondered that, or didn't even know to think about this, but now have an idea in their head like, oh, that is kind of a thing, isn't it? Maybe I should think about that. Your training should always have a purpose, and you should know why you're doing the things that you're doing. Alright, that's it. As always, thank you for watching. Subscribe if you like the videos. Tell your friends about it, and help spread the word. All this stuff is for you guys, so you're not going to lose out on anything. As we move forward, to try and get a lot of things going so that we can give back to the community that we help create. That's about it. Any questions you guys have, new things you want to know about, list them down in the bottom. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day. Peace.